If there's one thing that Democrats and the left need to be doing right now, it's taking a page out of the Black Panther playbook. And by the way, I think this will also help explain why so many so-called Christians in America are chomping at the bit to make people starve. The DNC is very bad at a lot of things, and while I'd love to get into all of them, one of them is, of course, branding. The most basic example of this, for example, is that Dems have yet to figure out how valuable it is to slap your name on stuff. Far be it for me to compliment Trump on anything, but if there's one thing he fully understands, it's that. And on a certain level, it makes sense, right? The left and Dems like to be altruistic for the sake of being altruistic. They don't like bragging about it because then it feels weird. But this is something you're gonna have to get over if you want to get anywhere. Sorry. For example, the fact that Dems let Republicans just get away with naming Medicaid and Medicare in their states something completely unrelated, resulting in millions of Americans relying on those systems, not realizing that those are the funds they are relying on. And hell, even when their name is slapped on something like Obamacare, they don't seem to use that opportunity. ACA is literally contained within the name Obamacare. Do you know how much marketing potential you were handed on a silver platter that you just never took advantage of? And this, by the way, has always been true. Old men have always loved putting their names on things. Everything you put out about yourself is about branding, but Dems have never figured this out. The Black Panthers did. The Black Panther Party, well, it began in 1966 as a sort of rapid response cop watch program, and I am oversimplifying here. In 1969, chapters across the country expanded their organizing approaches and started programs that were what J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI at the time, called, quote, potentially the greatest threat to efforts by authorities to neutralize the BPP and destroy what it stands for. That threat? A program providing free breakfast to school children. I'm not kidding. At its peak, the party was feeding thousands of children a day across the nation in at least 45 different programs. They also organized free community clinics and ambulance rides because, of course, Black Americans were not receiving appropriate medical care at the time. These programs that were organized entirely using volunteer work and donations were such a threat to the status quo, they were raided multiple times by police. Yes, including the breakfast programs for children. The problem with these programs wasn't just that they were serving underserved communities, that the powers that be had decided were undeserving of being served. The problem was also that they were realizing that they didn't actually need to rely on the systems that were actively failing them. They were able to strengthen and benefit their own communities without permission. But also, this made the Black Panthers look really, really good. Because up until now, they of course had been painted as thugs. They were always pictured holding weapons and looking menacing. Never mind, of course, that this was all based on self-defense. They were easy boogeymen for white America in the 1960s. And don't even get me started on the FBI's COINTELPRO. The federal government needed them to be scary, to be the enemy. But you know what isn't really all that scary? An organization that's out here feeding school children breakfasts for free or providing free healthcare to its local community. An organization that is modeling positive Black self-determination while preaching it. These programs and this community organizing very clearly benefited the Black Americans they were designed to help, but they also benefited the Black Panther Party because an organization that is visibly helping people is an organization that becomes popular, especially when there are many, many needs to be met. But anyway, setting all of that aside, do you know why so many so-called Christians in America are perfectly happy with letting people starve? And no, they're not all aware of this reasoning. I'm talking more like the strategic ones. Why are they convincing fellow Christians to let people starve? Or more importantly, why are they encouraging them to adopt this idea that it is not the government's job to make sure that people are fed? Despite the fact that their own Bible, Jesus Christ himself was like, hey, hungry people should be fed. What the churches figured out is that there is more opportunity and value to them, not in people being fed, but rather in them being the ones to feed people. They're happy with more people going hungry if those that don't are finding their help in a church. The more people depend on churches to survive, the more, both genuinely as well as out of necessity, their allegiance is to the church. This is Christo-nationalist soft power. They don't want people depending on the government because then people will have faith in the government. They don't want people depending on their fellow nameless, faceless taxpayers because then people will have faith in their fellow nameless, faceless taxpayers. They don't want your social safety nets to be held by society at large because that means that that everyone who is a member of society is entitled to it. And that means that you might see the quote unquote wrong type of person as your social equal. And obviously we should acknowledge that even programs like SNAP and Medicare do gatekeep. Like, no, despite their lies, undocumented immigrants are not receiving these benefits. There is so much more that can be gained from putting necessities behind a paywall. And in this specific case, of course, the paywall is church. And I want to point out, it should be quite obvious that there's a very big difference between what the right is currently doing and what the BPP did. Because the right is actively creating needs in order to exploit them and selectively fulfill them. Whereas the BPP identified existing needs and decided to fill them when the system refused to. I know, and I am seeing both Dems and people on the left organizing and fundraising to help food pantries and other organizations to help people that are very much in need, especially now. And the recent ruling obligating the Trump admin to release SNAP funds notwithstanding, there's a reason that the governors that were all stepping up to the plate to help their constituents who were about to lose SNAP benefits were all Democrats. There's a reason that it's Democrats fighting for people's health care right now. And yet, there is a reason that Republicans in the federal government keep violating the Hatch Act and lying on federal websites, blaming Democrats for the shutdown and lying about undocumented immigrants receiving benefits. And that's because it works. Democrats are bad at branding. They are bad at taking credit when they should. They are bad at deflecting blame when it's not their fault. And if there's another pretty awful page out of the Republican handbook that Dems and the left should absolutely take, it's this. Never let a good tragedy go to waste. Not just people and organizations on the left, but the DNC itself and Democratic donors. You guys should be setting up things like free breakfast programs for children. And you should be sticking a big old banner right on top of it saying Democrat food drive. Hell, I would even actually say you should say socialist food drive. Quit with the bipartisan, nonpartisan nonsense and go out there and rep your partisanship. Don't turn people away. That's not what I'm saying, but welcome them in, give them something they need, and then remind them who is giving it to them. Democratic governors that are using state funds to cover SNAP should be making that abundantly clear because, fun fact, the Hatch Act only applies to federal employees, not state governors, and programs that are federally funded, which if you're using state funds to cover them, they are not. Unfortunately, most existing food pantries and soup kitchens have to be nonpartisan, like legally, but now's the time to pop up some shops, if you catch my drift. This is when you call your donors, Dems, or put your own salaries down, because God knows you're still earning them. This is when party organizing of volunteer efforts needs to be occurring. People need help, so go out and help them. And make sure it's clear who's doing it. Oh, does that feel gross? Does that feel icky? I don't care. Suck it up. And will some members on the right accuse you of just doing it for the photo op? Of course. But, like, who cares? You know what also will be happening? People will be getting fed. And quite frankly, the right is going to accuse you of whatever they want. Who cares? And before you start questioning it, just trust me, the right is already doing it with the churches, at the very least. Stop being dummies, go out there and help people, and start taking credit.